Our smallest one we have first. This is a rankins dragon. This little guy right here. They are the smaller cousin to the bearded dragon, which we'll have in a second. This right here is a full-grown male compared to this, which is a full-grown male bearded dragon. These rankins dragons get about 8 to 12 inches, where their cousins, the bearded dragon, can get up to 2 feet long. The rankins can live for about 6 to 10 years. These guys can live for up to 15 years. They live in the desert outbacks of Australia. They'll eat any kind of greens, succulents, which are like cactuses and stuff like that. And they'll eat any kind of insects and even small rodents that they come across. I've been keeping these bearded dragons. I've kept them my entire 20 years. I've had probably hundreds of babies of bearded dragons over the years. In the last couple of years, been starting to breed these guys right here, the rankins. Probably only one of maybe a dozen people in the country that keep rankins dragons. No animals can be exported from Australia for a long time now, so all these guys and their lineage have all been captive bred. This is an Australian water dragon, a little bit more skittish than the other guys. He is still just a baby. He's only about a year and a half old right now. These guys, full grown, will be almost 3 feet. They live in the forested areas of Australia, up near rivers mostly. These guys, when they're threatened, will dive into the water and can stay underwater for up to half an hour without having to come up for a breath. They'll eat mainly insects and occasional small rodents they'll grab. Very occasionally, not as often as the beardies and the rankins, but they will eat some vegetation and fruits as well. He's not used to being held as the other guys are yet. He's still young, but we're working on him. He's gotten a lot better than when we first got him. Yes?
How long do water dragons live?
These guys, about as long as the bearded dragons, so about 15 years is their lifespan. The bearded dragons are one of the easier ones to tell if it's a male or female. Males have a really, really wide head, and they also, this beard on the bottom right here is why they're called bearded dragons. They'll puff it out and it turns jet black. Usually when they're either trying to find a female or they have another male in the area and they're trying to act tough and big around, they'll puff out this beard to about twice the size and turns jet black. That's why they're called bearded dragons. We have a leopard gecko. These guys are from the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq.
One thing I noticed about it is that it has spots all over its back, which I think is why it's called a leopard.
It is. That is why they're called leopard gecko. Now you can see lots of them that have lots and lots of different colors, but this is their natural color. They're a yellow and purplish color with big brown spots all over them. These guys can actually live for up to 25 plus years. They have this big fat tail. This is where they keep their fat reserves. They can drop that tail though. If they're being chased by a predator, they will drop that big tail and they will normally regrow it. Not all lizards can regrow their tails, but these guys can. These guys are strictly insectivores, meaning they're going to eat crickets, roaches, mealworms. They will take the occasional small rodents, pinky mice. This is a full-grown adult male right here, so they're not going to get much bigger than about 8 to 12 inches would be a really, really big one. You have this one who's a little bit more jumpy. This is a crested gecko. These guys come from New Caledonia, which is an island off of Australia. As you can see, he lost his tail. A lot of crested geckos lose their tails. They've actually, in the wild, have never found a crested gecko that has a tail on it because they drop them so often. And this is one lizard that cannot regrow their tail. So once their tail is gone, it's gone forever. But when they do have a tail, it's a prehensile tail. So they'll use it to grab onto the trees that they live in. These guys' main diet is fruit. They'll eat nectars and rotten fruit that's falling to the ground. That's mainly what they eat. They will eat occasional insects, but they are mainly a rotten fruit eating gecko. They are called the crested gecko because if you get a look at them, they have ridges right along the top of their head. So that's how they get their name. Crested gecko, they're also known as the eyelash gecko because if you look at them closely, they have little eyelashes, ridges above their eyeballs. The leopard geckos are one of the only geckos that actually have eyelids. Most geckos, like these guys right here, don't have eyelids. They can't close their eyes. So in order to clean the eyes, they will lick their eyeballs. You'll see them, they'll stick their tongue out and lick their eyeballs because they can't close them to clean them. And crested geckos and these leopard geckos are also mostly nocturnal animals, which means they do most of their activity at night, most of the hunting at night. During the majority of the day, they're napping. These guys will be napping up in a tree somewhere, where your leopard geckos will be sleeping in usually rock crevices in the deserts of the Middle East. And these guys also, which is how a lot of arboreal geckos, meaning geckos that live up in the trees, if you look at their fingers and you feel their toe pads, they have sticky toe pads. They can actually climb straight up a glass wall. Their toe pads have these hairs on them that allow them to climb up a sheer ledge like glass. They'll climb up straight up a piece of glass and will actually stick to it. A lot of times, like in the wild, they would throw their tail because they're getting chased by a predator, so that the predator goes and eats the tail and can have a snack, and the gecko can get away. Which most geckos can drop their tails for that very reason, so that their tail will actually still be twitching while they're running away, so that whatever's chasing them will stop and eat their tail while the gecko can get away. And most of the time, they'll grow them back. Except for the crested geckos, one of the only animals that can't grow them back. And up until the mid-90s, they actually thought crested geckos were extinct. They hadn't seen one in decades. They were just rediscovered in the 90s and now are one of the most popular captive bred animals. In just 25, 30 years ago, they were thought to be extinct.